I'm Liz Scuff and welcome to this channel. Gonna get it right this week. Collaborative Learning for Cultural Repair. Today's video is part 3 of a 5-part series about inner criticism. And in this video we're exploring what you can do in your own sort of inner world to work with inner criticism. That's not, of course, completely comprehensive. These are huge and complex and very individual experiences. But it's a few ideas. Now, if you haven't watched the first 2 videos, this might not make quite as much sense, but it probably will still make enough sense. Let's see what you think. If it doesn't, go back and watch the other 2. I mean, they're cool as well, so they might just be worth watching anyway. Now, just a little heads up, later in the video, I'm going to be using schoolyard bullying as a kind of metaphor. So if that's not going to be good for you today, I just recommend stopping the video now and then come back if or when that changes. So that's just a little bit of a heads up about what's coming that might feel a little challenging for some people to kind of listen to or think about. Now, like part 2 in this series, this video only really applies to what I call sort of like those regular garden variety critics, not the really intense versions experienced as part of suicidality. So if you experience suicidality, just don't assume that these ideas are safe or effective for working with that. They're not. Or they're not necessarily, and I don't recommend you work on your own inner criticism at all on your own. Even with a very excellent video like this, I think suicidality is life-threatening, and trying to work on it on your own puts you at risk of, puts you at increased risk, right? So working with somebody with stuff like this, I think makes it safer. And also, if you do experience really hostile inner criticism, but without suicidality, you might also find that it's not safe enough to do this work on your own. You see how you go, but generally our internal capacity for protection isn't high enough to do it on our own. But just see how you go. Here's the last preface before we get into it. Everyone's process is a bit different. So these ideas, they're only going to be useful if they resonate with your own lived experience. So if they don't feel like they really fit for you, discard them and keep hunting for something that does. So great ideas aren't always great fits, and you really want to preference a great fit over an idea that you like better. It's got to fit. Okay, let's start with a true story from my own inner world to illustrate what we might do with how we respond to inner critics. So many years ago, I bought a very old, derelict and decrepit house with the intention of rebuilding it, which I did. But in this house, in the shed, I had, so embarrassing, I had 5 pairs of scissors. And so I had office scissors, kitchen scissors, garden scissors, my building reno scissors, and sewing scissors. Now, if you're also a sewer, you will understand and appreciate why I had 5 pairs of scissors. Otherwise you might not, but no need to criticize. Anyway, one day I'm speeding through the house on some mission and I go to grab my office scissors, but they're not where I normally keep them. So then I'm on the way to the kitchen to get those scissors, and my inner critic says, how will you ever achieve anything worthwhile in your life if you can't even put the scissors back in the right place? It's ridiculous, right? And at the time, because I had the benefit of many years of therapy already under my belt, I did experience it as a bit ridiculous rather than deflating, which was nice. I was able to catch it and just go, seriously? That's bonkers. But in a moment like that, whether you feel deflated by it or you kind of see the ridiculousness of it, there's a range of things one could do, or I could have done in that situation, right? And maybe there's a longer list than what I'm going to cover, but I'm going to cover just some essentials, right? I could do nothing. That's the first one. I could respond in a protective way to what is rude behaviour, or rude inner dialogue. The third one is I could try to retrain this critic, and I could try to make it useful, or try to check if it does actually have anything useful to say. So those are the 3 options I'm kind of going to explore here. Now, I'm going to come back to these options in a moment. We're going to go on a little tangent to the side first to help us analyse just a little bit what's going on in that moment. And if you remember back to video 1, if you did get to see it, inner criticism is a communication exchange, which means there are at least 2 parts of self involved, right? So there's a critic and there's a victim of the critic. Now, a metaphor to illustrate these different inner roles in communication with each other in inner criticism, is to imagine two kids behind the canteen, school canteen, and one is bullying the other, saying mean things, right? So in one scenario, it's just those two kids. Nobody is there to witness it, just the two roles, right? In another scenario, there's a witness, and they just stand there and they watch. So there's a critic, the bully, the victim, and then there's a bystander who just stands there and watches and observes and is witness and is aware of what's going on, but doesn't do anything. Third scenario, there is a witness. There's the two, the bully and the kid getting bullied, or the inner critic and the part being criticised. And then there's a witness, and they try to make things better by saying nice things to the victim. You're amazing. I really admire blah, blah, blah. No, you're really, really nice. Lots of people like you, kind of thing, right? Like trying to say affirming statements, motivational, inspirational statements. So that's another scenario. Now, these three, they're all harmful scenarios. But interestingly enough, the second scenario where the witness is there but does nothing is usually the worst for the victim than no witness, which also means when we observe inner criticism without responding, it's worse than if we didn't notice it, right? The third scenario where there is a witness and they just try to say nice things, it's only minimally useful in psychological terms. It's a little bit like motivational, inspirational, or affirmations, right? Or these kind of quotes. They're usually actually only helpful for people who don't really need them. Now, the best scenario is when there is a witness who acts in a protective way to stop the bullying, right? So this actually introduces a third role in the inner criticism dynamic, and this is usually a vacant or unoccupied role or insufficiently occupied, right? It's a boundary or protector kind of role. And strengthening this inner role is good for almost everyone with a Western psyche. I don't know about other cultures, I couldn't really speak to that. But this role of a witness who does something to stop the bullying behaviour before they say nice things to the person getting bullied, it's really, really important. And so in our own inner dialogue, being able to step in and say, hey, this isn't okay, we need to be able to develop this as well, right? So if we go back to my scissor story and remember those three options I have, right? Do nothing, be protective, or be curious and retrain. If I do nothing, I've been that passive witness to my own inner bullying, and that's generally going to be the worst option. It kind of says, yes, I see you getting hurt and I'm not going to do anything about it, which feels a bit like somehow we aren't worth protecting. Now, that is a more harmful message most of the time than the original criticisms. So not being worthy of protection and safety and respect is that's a deeper rooted criticism than you're disorganized or whatever that is. So I could have also responded in a protective way, that second option, which is a witness. Oh no, it's not the witness who says nice things. It's not a good option. It's the protective way that says, it could sound something like, hey, don't talk to me like that, it's not okay. Or something of the sort, right? Sometimes that could come out and you just really follow your own process. Sometimes it could come out quite aggressively and there might be swearing involved, and that would actually be okay. It just depends on your own process. Other times it might come out more lovingly. I really understand that you're frustrated and but darling, it's really not okay to use that kind of language. Maybe that's the style that comes out in you in the moment. That would be fine too. Whatever kind of feels naturally emergent for you. Now, I tend to think some form of this kind of protection needs to happen all the time. Every time we catch ourselves being criticised, we need some kind of protective boundary or kind of calling out the behaviour kind of thing. Now, sometimes we should stop there. That's all it is. We're not discussing it further. Other times we could add in this third option or something else potentially, which brings with it an assumption potentially that the critic may sometimes have useful insights for us. They're just being delivered in a really unuseful way. So we can get curious and make the critic more useful. And this is actually what I did in my scissor situation, again, because I had lots and lots of therapy. And I responded sort of along the lines of, you know what, that's really unhelpful. It's only taken me 10 extra seconds to find the scissors. But is there somewhere specifically in my life that I actually need to be more organised in? It's not about the scissors, right? And my critic says, yes, your paperwork management is a mess. And I said, oh, yes, it is. That's a really good point. Have any ideas about how to fix it? And then my critic transforms for a moment into an organising genius with a really nifty plan to get my papers in order. Fantastic, right? Now, it sounds like a bit trite, and obviously not all inner critic encounters go like this. And even if 50% of them did, right? Retraining inner critics to be more respectful and more specific is slow work. It's like they're slow learners, right? They take a long time because they're really ingrained in us. I shouldn't say slow learners, I'm sorry. That was I don't edit my videos, so I'm just going to say sorry for that. That's a bit rude and disrespectful. Okay. Now, I'm not even sure, I'm talking about retraining, I'm not even sure psychodynamically if this is retraining a critic or if it's just building the muscles of a role more like a really excellent internal parent role, right? Either way you constructed or thought of that psychodynamically, it's going to be nicer than just plain old inner criticism anyway. So these are 3 ideas about how to respond. Well, actually it's 2 ideas because I don't generally recommend the do nothing option. So you can protect, set a boundary of some kind, and then ask the critic to be more useful or specific and see if there's anything, useful that they've got for you. Now, a couple of small side notes. There's always side notes. First one, protecting isn't the same as defending. If you try to defend yourself against a critic, like get into a debate about why what it says isn't true, it will wear you down. They're like, they've got so much energy, right? It's our own energy, but they've got a lot. So don't bother. You do not have to justify being treated respectfully. You just address the behaviour, not the content. Don't get into a debate about the content. Just say, it's not okay to talk to me like that. You don't have to debate about how organised you are or you aren't, or the reasons why it's hard to be organised, or whatever the criticism is, right? Second one is how you want to retrain your inner critic. It's up to you, actually. Like, think about, what is the kind of internal environment that would really help you thrive in your life. Now, the research certainly suggests that self-compassion works really well as an inner attitude to self. For me, and you pick your own, but here's what I kind of read. I retrain for respect, specificity, because generalized feedback, positive or negative, is useless. Cheering, I like to be cheered on, and I want my disappointments validated. So when I don't meet my own mark or something doesn't work, I don't want to be criticized, but I am going to be disappointed, and so I want that just to be validated and have some space for that. And I also want to retrain for really connecting to my faith in a bigger picture. That when I do make mistakes or things like this, that there is a bigger picture in play, and the fine details often, it's not the end of the world. But working out how you like to be responded to in moments of challenge, that's gold. Try to retrain your internal parts in that direction. Now, on a slightly different tangent, but still related, another thing you can do in a more general sense, and then you can make it very specific to these moments of inner criticism and how to respond, is to work out where your particular experience of inner criticism, where did it come from? Where's it patterned from, right? So on first inspection, our inner critics are a bit basic. They have maybe 3 to 5 standard tropes, maybe a bit more sometimes, but not a lot actually. So standard tropes, standard narratives or stories that they use. They might mix up the delivery style and the content in the context of them, but they are generally the same basic core criticisms. So working out what these are, make a list or whatever you like, and then think about where do they come from? Do they sound like or feel like, or are they directly parroting, like your parents, older siblings, other family members, a school teacher, or are they from a belief system like a religion? Maybe they're like narratives from a religious text, or are they isms based on tropes from things like sexism, colonialism, racism, genderism, ableism, saneism, classism, all the isms, right? They've all got critical narratives towards the subjugated or the oppressed group, the marginalised group, that become internal criticism. So that's the internalized oppression kind of process. Now, ism-based tropes, they have some shared tropes and some that are very different based on the kind of ism, right, we're experiencing. But for example, one that's shared that I think I've seen across all the ones I'm aware of, right, is that not being smart is an oppressive narrative across all isms, right? So all subjugated groups are made to think they aren't as smart as the dominant group. Another thing to think about, maybe it's about isms, maybe it's your family of origin, your upbringing. Another one is wondering, are they, your inner criticisms, are they messages from like a neoliberal capitalist culture designed to make you buy stuff you don't need, just to give you a dopamine hit, to give you a moment's peace from inner criticism, right? All the ways in which we're constantly messaged, certainly in a Western culture like white Australian culture around our inadequacies. We see it through marketing a lot, and so we go and buy stuff to feel more adequate, right? Because our inner critics are picking up those messages and going, yeah, you're not this or that or the other, right? So that might be another place where they're coming from. And you can use that insight about where did you learn these criticisms. You can use that to customize your own protective and retraining strategies as well. Like maybe sometimes I have a certain kind of thing and I can just go, oh yeah, thanks patriarchy, right? And that kind of labeling it as something like a systemic process rather than my own internal history or whatever can actually be quite helpful. So, and you can also use this, use that insight to just go and extend your education around internalized oppression and dynamics of structural violence. Because if we take our inner criticism too personally, as if it just belongs to us and it's not part of a purposeful socio-political system that privileges some people over others, right? If we take it too personally, it's inaccurate, but B, it's actually really unhelpful. And when we understand a lot of our inner criticisms quite impersonal, it can actually make it a lot easier to live with or to rebuff and protect ourselves from, and to retrain and make it useful. So I think that's a really good direction, as well as really understanding where does it come from and then how would that change how you think about it and respond to it as well. Okay, that was a lot. I'm not sure if I spoke too fast. Sorry if I did. I get excited, especially about the last bit about the systemic work. Anyway, I hope you found it useful. I would love to read your thoughts, reflections, tips, or any respectful, specific and constructive disagreements in the comments below. And watch out for part 4. It's coming next week, I hope. Not entirely sure what it's going to be about, but it's still going to be about inner criticism. And yeah, hopefully see you then. Okay, bye.